My name is Natalie Brooks. I am 30 years old. 11 years ago, my mother-in-law, Linda Hargrove, planted altered financial records and suspicious text messages in our home to convince my husband Ryan I was hiding a serious spending problem and being unfaithful with our money. He almost believed her. Now I sit in the emergency room at Plano Medical Center after passing out at a family gathering, and she is whispering to the staff that this proves my long-term hidden issues and that I cannot be trusted with my health decisions. This time, I knew I had to stand my ground no matter the cost to my family ties. If an in-law has ever tried to turn your spouse against you with lies like that, let me know in the comments what you went through. I read every single one. It started with the little things, the kind of everyday comments that seem harmless until you realize they are chipping away at your place in the family. 9 years ago, my husband and I had just bought our first house in upscale Plano, Texas, a modest 3-bedroom with a backyard big enough for weekend barbecues. My mother-in-law loved dropping by unannounced. She would arrive with a casserole and a smile, but her eyes always scanned the mail on the counter or the receipts pinned to the fridge. At first, I thought she was just being helpful the way any new mother-in-law might be. Then the remarks began. During one Sunday afternoon visit, she picked up a credit card statement I had left on the kitchen island and waved it like a flag. "Natalie, darling, I see you spent quite a bit at that boutique last week. My husband works so hard. You know, some wives learn to stretch a dollar instead of stretching the truth about where it goes." My best friend Kayla Reeves, who had stopped by for coffee, caught my eye across the room and gave me a small shake of her head. She had seen enough already to know this was not random. Those small violations kept coming. My mother-in-law would accidentally forward old family group texts that left me out of weekend plans, then act surprised when I asked why. She told the neighbors in our cul-de-sac that I seemed overwhelmed with the new mortgage and maybe needed someone to manage our finances for us. My husband's sister Brooke and brother Marcus started repeating her phrases at family dinners. "Mom just wants what is best for you two," Brooke would say with a sweet smile. Each time I tried to push back, my mother-in-law would tilt her head and say, "Oh, Natalie, you always take things so personally. We are only trying to help you fit in." The real blow came on a quiet Tuesday evening. My husband was working late at his engineering firm. I came home from my job as a customer success manager at a tech consulting company in nearby Dallas to find my mother-in-law in our living room, holding a stack of printed bank statements she claimed she found while tidying up. Her voice was calm and concerned, the way she always sounded when she delivered the worst news. "My husband asked me to look at these because he was worried. Natalie, these transfers to an account I do not recognize. The late-night text from that unknown number." I had to show him. A wife who hides money is a wife who hides everything. I stood there frozen, my keys still in my hand. The statements were not mine. The numbers had been doctored, the dates changed, and the texts were from a burner number I had never seen. But my husband walked in right then and saw his mother holding the papers with tears in her eyes. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw real doubt. My mother-in-law did not stop there. She turned to him and delivered the line that still echoes. "Son, I love you too much to watch her destroy what we built for you." If she cannot be honest about money, how can she be honest about anything else in this marriage? My husband asked me to leave for a few days so he could think. I packed a bag and drove to my grandmother Evelyn Hayes' house across town. Kayla met me there that night with her laptop open. "This does not add up," she said. "I work in IT security at the same company as your husband's cousin Derek. I can pull some records quietly. My therapist, Dr. Amanda Torres, had me on an emergency call the next morning. This is classic emotional coercion," she told me. "Your mother-in-law is using guilt and manufactured evidence to isolate you. We document everything." The next week felt like walking through fog. My mother-in-law kept texting my husband little updates about how concerned the family was. Brooke posted a vague social media story about protecting the ones you love from hidden truths. Marcus called me once and said, "Look, Mom is only doing this because she sees the pattern." You need to be more open with us. I tried to explain the statements were fake, but every time I spoke, my mother-in-law would interrupt with another calm, cutting remark. Darling, denial is not a plan. My husband deserves a wife he can trust with the future we planned. Kayla and I spent evenings going through old bank logs. We found the real transfers had been initiated from my mother-in-law's IP address on days I was at work with time-stamped meetings as proof. Nathan Cole, the family attorney I hired on Dr. Torres' recommendation, requested security footage from the bank branch where the altered documents were printed. This is going to get ugly, he warned me on the phone. But we have a case for fraud and emotional manipulation. Just when I thought we had enough to confront her, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message read, "Keep digging, and everyone will see what you really are." My husband will choose blood over a liar. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. My mother-in-law had not sent it directly, but the timing was too perfect. My husband called me that same night, voice tired. Mom says she only wants to protect our marriage. She showed me more messages. Natalie, I do not know what to believe anymore. I sat on my grandmother's couch, the paper spread around me, and felt the walls closing in. Kayla squeezed my hand. We are not stopping now. But as the mediation meeting approached, I wondered how much more my mother-in-law had prepared in the shadows. The ordinary family life we had built in Plano was cracking, and the next step she took would decide whether I could ever stand on my own again. The mediation meeting was scheduled for the following Friday at Nathan Cole's office downtown. I arrived early with Kayla right beside me, clutching the folder of bank records and IP traces we had spent nights piecing together. My grandmother had offered to come too, but I told her to stay home and rest because I needed to face this on my own terms. The conference room smelled like fresh coffee and tension as my husband walked in with my mother-in-law on his arm. She looked perfectly put together in her cream blouse and pearl earrings, the picture of concerned family matriarch. My mother-in-law did not waste a second. The moment Nathan started explaining the timeline of the altered statements, she leaned forward with that calm, measured voice. "Natalie, darling, we all know how stressed you have been at that customer success job of yours. Late nights, constant calls from clients. It is no wonder mistakes happen with the household accounts. But hiding transfers and then blaming me, that is not the behavior of a woman who wants this marriage to last." She turned to my husband and placed a hand on his arm. "Son, I only stepped in because I could not watch her isolate you from the family we built together. A wife who cannot be transparent about money cannot be transparent about anything." My husband shifted in his seat but did not pull away. I felt the words land like ice water down my spine. Kayla squeezed my knee under the table, her eyes flashing with anger. She kept silent for now. Nathan slid the printed IP logs across the table. "Mrs. Hargrove, these records show the documents were accessed and modified from an address linked to your home network on dates when Natalie was verified at work meetings. We also have footage from the print shop showing someone matching your description." My mother-in-law let out a soft, pitying laugh that felt sharper than any shout. "Oh, Nathan, you are a good lawyer, but you do not know how these things work in a real family. Natalie has always been so sensitive about her independence. She probably asked one of her co-workers to help cover her tracks. That Sarah Klein from her office seems awfully eager to defend her lately." That was the first time I heard my co-worker Sarah Klein dragged into it. Sarah had only sent me a supportive text after I missed a team call because of the stress. Yet here my mother-in-law was weaving her into the story like she had proof. My husband looked at me, then doubt flickering across his face again. "Natalie, is there something you are not telling me? Mom mentioned you two have been texting a lot lately." I opened my mouth to explain that Sarah was just checking on me as any decent colleague would, but my mother-in-law cut in first with another perfectly timed jab. "See, even now she hesitates. My husband, sweetheart, I love you too much to let this slide. If she cannot own up to her mistakes here, how can we trust her with the future we planned for you? The house, the family gatherings, everything we sacrificed for." The room felt smaller with every word. Nathan tried to steer things back to facts, but my mother-in-law had already shifted the conversation to reputation. She pulled out her phone and showed my husband a screenshot of an old group chat where I had once joked about treating myself to new work clothes after a big client win. Look at this, son. She calls it self-care, but I call it hiding expenses. And now she is dragging outsiders like Sarah into our private business. Brooke and Marcus had not even been invited to the mediation yet. Somehow their texts started flooding my husband's phone during the meeting, echoing the same lines my mother-in-law had planted. Mom is only protecting you, Brooke wrote. Marcus added, Natalie has always been the independent type, but maybe too independent. I sat there feeling my chest tighten the same way it had 11 years ago when the first little comment started. Dr. Amanda Torres had warned me this would happen, that emotional coercion often escalated when the manipulator felt cornered. But knowing it and living it were two different things. My mother-in-law leaned back in her chair, folding her hands neatly. Natalie, I am not the enemy here. I just want what is best for my son. If you truly cared about this family, you would step back and let us help manage things until you prove you can be trusted again. The words hung there laced with that fake sweetness that made my skin crawl. My husband did not defend me. He just looked tired and said he needed more time to think. The meeting ended with no resolution, only another mediation date set for 2 weeks later. As we walked out into the parking lot, Kayla pulled me aside near her car. That woman is a master at this. But we have more now. I asked Sarah Klein to write a statement about the work calls, and she agreed. Plus, I reached out to your husband's uncle Victor Lang. He used to handle the family finances before he retired, and he remembers your mother-in-law asking for login details last month. I nodded, grateful for the new allies stepping up, but the knot in my stomach only grew tighter. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number again. Keep involving outsiders and the whole family will hear how unstable you really are. That night, I stayed at my grandmother's house once more. She made me tea and listened without interrupting, while I replayed every cutting remark. Your mother-in-law has always seen you as the outsider who took her son away, she said quietly, but you do not have to carry that weight forever. The next morning, my husband called, voice strained. Mom wants us all at the house for dinner this weekend. She says it is important for healing. Natalie, please come. I hate feeling stuck in the middle. I agreed mostly because refusing would only give her more ammunition, but I brought Kayla and Dr. Torres' advice with me like armor. The family dinner at my in-laws' house in Plano started civil enough. My father-in-law, Robert Hargrove, grilled steaks on the patio while the rest of us sat around the table. But the moment the plates were served, my mother-in-law initiated the next round. She passed the salad bowl to my husband first, then looked straight at me. Natalie, I noticed you have been working even longer hours lately. Is that why the household budget keeps slipping? Or is there something else eating away at our savings? Brooke chimed in right on cue. Yeah, Mom mentioned the strange transfers again. We are all worried about you two. My mother-in-law delivered the real strike. Darling, if you cannot be honest here in front of family, how can we ever trust you with grandchildren one day? A mother who hides things cannot be trusted to raise them right. The words hit harder than I expected. My husband stayed silent, cutting into his steak like the conversation was about the weather. I felt my hands tremble under the table. Kayla, who had come as my plus one, spoke up for the first time. With all due respect, Mrs. Hargrove, the records show the changes came from your network. Maybe we should focus on facts instead of assumptions. My mother-in-law smiled that tight little smile and turned to my husband again. See, son, even her friends are turning this into an attack on me. This is exactly what I warned you about. Natalie surrounds herself with people who enable her instead of supporting the family. Uncle Victor Lang arrived late to the dinner, and I hoped his presence might shift things. He had always been the quiet, reasonable one in the extended family, but my mother-in-law had clearly prepared him too. Victor, you remember how careful we were with money when the kids were young. Tell Natalie how important transparency is in a marriage. Victor cleared his throat uncomfortably but repeated the party line. It is true. Honesty keeps a family strong. The betrayal felt complete. Even the new voices I thought might help were being folded into her narrative. By dessert, the pressure had built to a breaking point. My mother-in-law stood up, refilled my husband's glass, and then dropped the final jab of the evening. My husband, sweetheart, I think it is time we consider separate finances until Natalie proves she can be part of this family without secrets. I can help you set it up. After all, I only want what is best for my son. The table went quiet. I looked at my husband, waiting for him to push back, but he only nodded slowly. Maybe that is fair, Natalie, just until things settle. I excused myself to the bathroom, heart racing, and stared at my reflection. When I came back, Kayla was waiting by the door with her coat on. "We need to leave now," she whispered. "Sarah Klein just texted me a voice recording from work where your mother-in-law called the office pretending to be concerned about your mental health." My phone lit up with another anonymous message as we stepped outside. "One more week, and my husband will see you for what you really are." The ordinary family dinner had turned into another trap, and I realized my mother-in-law was not going to stop until she had full control. 2 days later, the second mediation loomed closer, but my mother-in-law had one more card to play. She showed up unannounced at my grandmother's house while I was reviewing notes with Nathan Cole. Standing on the porch with a folder in her hands, she smiled sweetly at my grandmother. "I just want to talk to Natalie alone." Mother to daughter-in-law. But the moment the door closed behind us, her tone sharpened. "You think bringing in lawyers and friends will fix this? My husband is starting to see the real you, and I will make sure he never unsees it." She slid the folder across the table. Inside were printed screenshots of old arguments I had with my husband twisted to look like financial fights. I felt the ground shift under me. Kayla was due to arrive any minute with the final bank audit, but my mother-in-law's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. One more push, and this marriage ends on my terms, not yours. The words hung between us like a threat, and just as I opened my mouth to respond, my phone rang. It was my husband, but before I could answer, my mother-in-law whispered one last line that made my blood run cold. "Pick up that call and tell him the truth, or I will tell him everything I have been holding back about your so-called independence." I stared at the ringing phone in my hand, my mother-in-law's eyes locked on mine with that same calm, calculated gleam she always wore when she knew she had the upper hand. The porch light at my grandmother's house cast long shadows across her face, making her look almost serene while she waited for me to crack. "Pick up that call and tell him the truth," she whispered again, her voice low and venomous, "or I will tell him everything I have been holding back about your so-called independence. The late nights at the office, the way you pull away from family events, the little secrets you think no one notices." My heart hammered against my ribs as the phone kept vibrating. For 11 years, I had tried to prove I belonged in this family, but every step forward had been met with her quiet sabotage, her rewritten narratives, her way of turning my husband against me without ever raising her voice. I answered the call on speaker so she could hear every word. My husband's voice came through tired and hesitant. "Natalie, Mom said she stopped by to talk. Is everything okay? She mentioned you have been avoiding the next mediation because you do not want to face what is really going on." My mother-in-law smiled triumphantly, folding her arms as if the game was already won. I took a slow breath, the cool evening air of Plano, Texas, doing nothing to calm the storm inside me. My husband: "I am done pretending. Your mother altered those records. She has been feeding you lies for years to keep control over our marriage. And I have proof from the bank, from my work logs, and from people who are not part of her little circle." My mother-in-law's smile faltered for half a second before she recovered, stepping closer so her words would carry clearly over the phone. "Son, listen to her. She is spinning this into an attack on me again. I only came here because I care about you two staying together. If she cannot be honest now, how can we ever move forward as a family?" The line went quiet for a long moment, and I felt the first real cliffhanger of the evening hanging in the air. Would my husband finally see it, or would he default to the comfort of his mother's version of events? He sighed heavily. Natalie, I want to believe you, but Mom has been there for us through everything. She is not the one hiding things. That was when my colleague Jared Mills, who had overheard one of my mother-in-law's calls to the office, pretending to be a concerned family member, sent me the voice recording I had been waiting for. I played it right there on speaker. My mother-in-law's voice filled the porch smooth and concerned on the recording as she told my boss I was struggling with personal financial issues that might affect my performance. My husband went silent. My mother-in-law lunged for the phone, but I held it away. That is enough. I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I am setting boundaries now. No more unannounced visits. No more financial oversight. And until you both respect that, I am moving out of our house and into my own place starting tomorrow. The words landed like a stone in still water, rippling out into the quiet neighborhood. My mother-in-law's face hardened, all pretense of sweetness gone. You are making a mistake, Natalie. My husband will see this for what it is. Another way, you are isolating him from the family that loves him. I have spent years making sure my son has the life he deserves, and you are not going to tear that apart with your accusations. My husband's voice cut in strained. Mom, wait. That recording? Natalie, we need to talk about this in person. But I could hear the hesitation, the pull of years of her influence tugging him back. I ended the call without another word, turning to face my mother-in-law directly. The second mini cliffhanger hit when the family mediator Elizabeth Grant, whom Nathan Cole had brought in for an emergency virtual session right then, joined the call from her office. She had been listening to the entire exchange through the speakerphone setup we had arranged earlier for safety. Mrs. Hargrove, this conversation is being recorded for the mediation file, Elizabeth said calmly. Altering financial documents and impersonating concern to an employer crosses into manipulative territory. Natalie has every right to establish these boundaries. My mother-in-law laughed bitterly, but it was the first time I saw a crack in her armor. She stepped back toward her car keys jingling in her hand. You think a mediator and a few recordings will fix this? My husband knows who has always had his best interest at heart. You are the outsider here, Natalie, and you always will be. She drove away into the darkening streets of Plano, leaving me standing on the porch with my grandmother watching from the doorway. My grandmother did not say much, just handed me a fresh cup of tea and squeezed my shoulder. You did what you had to, she murmured. Kayla arrived minutes later with Sarah Klein in tow, both of them carrying boxes of my things from the house that my husband had quietly packed after the call. He said he needs space too, Kayla told me gently, but he would not confront her directly. Not yet. The weeks that followed blurred into a slow, painful unraveling. I found a small apartment in a quiet part of Plano, far enough from the cul-de-sac where my mother-in-law's influence still lingered in every neighborhood barbecue invitation I turned down. My husband came by once to drop off the rest of my clothes, his eyes tired and conflicted. Mom keeps calling, saying I should fight for us the way she fought for our family all these years. I stood in the doorway of my new place, arms crossed, and repeated the boundary I had set. I love you, my husband, but I cannot keep fighting her shadow. Until she stops trying to rewrite our life, I am choosing to protect mine. He nodded, but I saw the way his shoulders slumped, the way he glanced toward his car, as if part of him wanted to drive straight to his parents' house for the comfort of their approval. We agreed to separate finances permanently. The house would be listed once the mediation wrapped, and contact would be limited to practical matters only. No more family dinners, no more surprise visits, no more letting her turn ordinary moments into weapons. The final mediation session 2 weeks later was the last time I saw most of them in one room. Elizabeth Grant presided with quiet authority, while Nathan Cole presented the full stack of evidence. My mother-in-law sat beside my husband, and my father-in-law, her face a mask of wounded innocence. I was only trying to help, she insisted when confronted with the recordings and bank traces. A mother-in-law has to look out for her son when she sees trouble brewing. Brooke and Marcus echoed her softly from the sidelines, But it was my mother-in-law who delivered one last sharp jab before the session ended. Natalie, you are walking away from everything we built together because you cannot handle being part of a real family. I hope you realize what you are giving up. The word stung, but I kept my voice even. I am not giving anything up. I am finally taking back what is mine. No more control. No more manufactured crises. This is the boundary, and it stays. My husband did not fight her. He signed the separation papers without argument, his eyes avoiding mine the entire time. Victor Lang and his wife Jessica Lang, who had quietly witnessed too many of these family gatherings over the years, offered me a polite nod of support on the way out. But they still went home with my mother-in-law and my father-in-law. Sarah Klein texted me later that day to say she had blocked my mother-in-law's number after one more fake concerned call to the office. Dr. Amanda Torres scheduled an extra session for me that same week, helping me process the loneliness that settled in like fog over the Texas plains. I had my job, my small apartment, my grandmother's weekly Sunday calls, and Kayla's standing offer for coffee whenever I needed it. But the family dinners, the holidays, the casual text from my husband that used to fill my days, they were gone. I had set the boundaries exactly as I needed to, yet the silence that followed felt heavier than any of my mother-in-law's accusations ever had. Months passed in that quiet isolation. I watched from afar as social media showed glimpses of the Hargrove family gatherings. I was no longer invited to my husband smiling beside my mother-in-law at a neighborhood event, her arm linked through his like nothing had changed. I did not reach out. I did not explain myself to anyone else. The boundaries I had drawn protected me, but they also left me standing alone on the other side of them. Some nights, I sat in my apartment replaying the porch confrontation, wondering if I could have said something different that might have forced my husband to choose me outright. But I knew the truth. My mother-in-law had spent 11 years building her influence brick by careful brick, and I had finally stopped handing her the mortar. Choosing myself meant accepting the loneliness that came with it, the empty chair at future family tables I would never sit in again, the quiet birthdays and anniversaries that would pass without a single call from the people who used to claim they loved me most. I still see my grandmother for tea every other weekend, and Kayla drags me out for walks along the trails near my new place when the weight feels too heavy. Jared Mills checks in from the office with work updates and the occasional reminder that not everyone believes the stories my mother-in-law tried to spread. Even Elizabeth Grant sent a follow-up note after the mediation closed, saying she admired how cleanly I had drawn the line. But none of it fills the space where a full family used to be. My husband and I are civil when we have to exchange paperwork for the house sale, yet the conversations are short and surface level, always ending with him mentioning how his mother still worries about me. I smile politely and change the subject, then hang up and sit in the quiet of my apartment. The boundaries I built, feeling both like armor and a cage. Looking back now, I realized the real cost was never the money or the house or even the marriage that slowly dissolved under the pressure. It was the slow realization that protecting myself meant stepping away from the very people I once thought would always have my back. My mother-in-law never apologized, never admitted what she had done. She simply kept living her version of events surrounded by the family that still chose her version of love. I chose myself instead, and that choice left me standing on my own 2 feet in a life that is smaller, but finally mine. It is not the ending I once dreamed of with big reconciliations or dramatic justice. It is quieter, lonelier, and strangely peaceful in its finality. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to draw a hard line with family to protect your peace and ended up feeling more alone than you expected, drop a comment and tell me how you handled the silence afterward. I read every one, and knowing I am not the only one makes the quiet feel a little less heavy.